Well, thank you very much for inviting me, because you're taking a risk. I am Frenchman, so English is not my mother language. So if you don't understand what I mean, it's not because my analysis is not great. It's because my accent is bad and my English is worse. But let's try. May I have a glass of water, please? The first, just some geopolitical aspect of the question. The Najd region in which Wahhabism was born has been a very isolated region which has never been touched by colonization, neither Ottoman colonization nor English colonization, which means that for the Wahhabis, I mean for Abdel Wahhab, the true Islam was the one which has never been touched by modern influence. It was considering that the true Islam, the Islam of the Salaf, was exactly the practicing of Islam of the isolated Najd, the pure Islam. So as soon as the kingdom has been created in 1932, the clerics of Saudi Arabia asked first to propagate Islam, I mean the Wahhabi version of Islam. Second point, to use the terms of Salafism and not Wahhabism, because it would be considered as, in a way, Abdel Wahhab as a saint, if you were to compare. No, it was Salafism, exactly the way to live as the Salaf, the companion of the Prophet. And the third point, to force local Shias to convert to Sunnism. That was the 3 points which was imposed by the clerics at the foundation of the region. So you remember that the conquest of the peninsula was made in 3 steps, but the interesting aspect of the religious aspect of the question was that, in fact, in the first step, Abdel Wahhab used the term of jihad to fight against other tribes of the peninsula and to fight against Ottoman Empire, which means that it was not exactly the meaning of jihad to fight against non-Muslims. It was the use of jihad to fight against Muslims. And in fact, I must conclude that jihad is, in a way, in the DNA of the regime. Because you pupils are listening this history, it belongs to the Saudi identity, national identity. Third point, all the kings have been taught in the Wahhabi madrasa. None have attended a foreign university. Even Mohammed bin Salman, which appeared as a modernist. In fact, he had just studied in the Islamic University of Riyadh, which means I would meet the professor, which tried to put bad notes in the exam. So they don't have, I might say, contact with foreign culture. It's a difference between this Saudi dynasty and the rest of the peninsula. For example, in Qatar, Tamim has done the Sandhurst University, the military Sandhurst University. The same for the Emirates prince, and the same for other rulers of the peninsula. But in Saudi, it's exactly a pure product of madrasa of the kingdom. So we have to notice that, in fact, the regime has 2 legs, 2 arms. The first one is the Saud dynasty, which everybody knows. We explained what's the rules between them, the way to transmit the power, etc. But the other leg, the other arm, which seems very important for me, is the Al-Sher family. The Al-Sher family are the descendants of Abdel Wahhab. And here, it's in French, but probably we understand it, that all the power of the family of the great Mufti. Because you have the libraries, you have the High Council of World Muslim League, you have the president of the University, Islamic University of Medina, in which I will come back, president of the different institutes of religious science, but also judiciary, you have also library, you have also university, you have also magistrates, education of women, foundation, etc. And that's very important to understand that, because in fact, in a way, the implementation of the religious diplomatic system of Saudi Arabia, you have to understand with this characteristic of the Saudi system. Because in the first historic steps of this system was the fight against Nasser. Why? Because Nasser was a leader of Pan-Arabism, Pan-Arabism ideology, and he was a great leader in the 50s and 60s. And Nasser was very critical regarding the power in the peninsula. So the first reaction of the Saudi kingdom was mainly to build an opposite system to the one of Nasser. For example, to respond to Arab League, the Saudi created the World Muslim League in '62. To face, the Al-Azhar University, they create the Islamic University of Medina in '61. To respond to Pan-Arabism, they use the concept of Pan-Islamism. And King Fahd used to say, I am not an Arab leader, I am a Muslim leader. And that's very important to understand that, in fact, just the first step was mainly to face, the modern aspect of the Pan-Arabism, and just remember that Nasser was regarded by Western power in that time as an enemy. The second step, which is important to understand, is the oil crisis during the huge wealth of Saudi Arabia, and the concept was modernization without change, which means that a lot of foreign companies arrived, to build defense systems, security systems, buildings, routes, etc., etc. But in fact, the background of the Al-Sheikh family was resisting to that modernization. They were opposed, for example, to the cinema, opposed to TV, etc., etc. And in fact, the crisis of 1971, one of the most important crises, was the occupation of Mecca by some more conservative students of the Great Mufti, of Ibn Baz, who was a Mufti at that time. So the year 1979 was a very difficult moment for Saudi Arabia, because in February there was a revolution in Iran, which means that for the first time the Shia appears in history. Just remember that with the Shah, it was no question of Shia in the identity of Iran. It was just the big brother of the region. So with Khomeini asking, for example, to manage the holy places by a collective meeting of Muslims, it was, in a way, an earthquake for the Saud dynasty. The second event was the occupation of a great mosque in Mecca by the most traditional students of the Ibn Baz, the great Mufti, and they were denouncing, this modernization of Saudi Arabia society. And the last point was by lucky chance for Saudi Arabia, because it was the occupation of Afghanistan by Soviet army, which means that they can expel, a lot of people disturbing young students in Afghanistan to fight against Soviet army. So this 79 year was very interesting also for you to pay attention to one fact which became a contradiction of the system. Sorry. When the dynasty needs Western armies' help to save the thrones, it needs also balanced approval from the clerics, because he has to explain that they use misbeliever, to help him, etc. And usually the Wahhabi hierarchy is providing very interesting arguments, using sometimes very imaginative interpretation of Quran just to justify that it was necessary to help American soldiers. But in exchange, the Saudi are obliged, to give more power to the clerics. And for example, after the Gulf in 1991, 92, all the cinemas rooms of Riyadh has been closed. What's the report? I don't know exactly, except the fact that, in fact, it was the hand of the clerics on the all aspect of the Saudi society. One of the girl I was working with for my book explained that when she was young, 30 years ago, she used to go in Saudi Arabia without any veil, with uncovered arms, etc. But now she is obliged to, which means that, the hand of the clerics on the all aspect of the Saudi society has been strengthened each time the dynasty is asking for Western help. So, method and organization. One of the interesting instruments of religious diplomacy is the World Muslim League, which has been created in 1972. The methods are the same everywhere. Founding mosque, for example, I was in Central Asia 2 weeks ago, and in all the former Soviet Union republics of Central Asia, Saudi Arabia, through the World Muslim League, has founded more than 2,000 mosques in the region. But the local Islam is very different of Wahhabism, so it's not really a successful campaign, but it's very interesting to notice the figures. With a side close to the mosque, you have a madrasa with special teaching, the Wahhabi version all over the world. Next step, they select the most interesting students to send them to Islamic University of Medina. And when you look at the figures, we think that the University of Medina has trained more than 30,000 foreign students, who are obliged to return to their country. They can't ask for the Saudi passport. That's different. The Saudi are talking about the Ummah, but not without the passport. That's different. And they are obliged, it's in the contract. They have a scholarship with the contract, and they are obliged to go back to their country to become preachers. Preachers, always Arabic version. So, for you but I will let you the slide. We have a very interesting former alumni. I'm quoting a very long list of former alumni of the University of Medina. One of the most interesting for us, because the other one are more concerned with Germany and with the other European countries. Mohamed Diko is the head of Al-Islamic Council of Mali, the former student of Medina University. And he refused to condemn the Radisson Blu attack hotel, which occurred in Mali in November 2015, explaining that it was a responsibility of colonialism and probably also of gay people. I don't understand exactly what explanation he makes, the contact he makes between the attack of Radisson Blu and gay people, but he used this explanation. Other example of alumni which are very interesting. Pierre Vogel is the preacher in Germany who explained that he criticized a woman which has been raped because he accused her to be Islamophobia. Muhammad al-Maghrawi was a Moroccan Salafi theologian, is a refugee in Saudi Arabia. His fatwa allows the girl to marry at 9, quoting the example of the Prophet. So, yes, that's finished, that's the conclusion. Some facts, just for you to keep in mind. Saudi combatant has been the most important contingent since foreign fighters during the Afghan wars against Soviet Union. They were the most important contingents with Daesh for a long time, 2,050, 500. Today overpassed by Tunisian. 15 out of 19 attackers of 9/11 terrorist attack were Saudi, not North Korean, as it was explained by George W. Bush. And now Saudi is not fighting against Daesh, against the Islamic State. It's competing with Daesh. That's why it fight against Yemen. He is using his arm against Shias. For example, in the coalition against Daesh, Saudi Arabia sent 17 combat aircraft. When they decide to invade Yemen, they retired, they get back, the 17th combat aircraft, and they deploy 100 combat aircraft against Yemen. So I think that there are probably an explanation of that attitude. That's my conclusion. Thank you very much.